What am I saying again?
This is MPW,
MPW.
the podcast
with your host, Xylo Aria.
Cool.
A podcast about music production
For the everyday musician.
where we learn from experienced studio engineers and each other.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the MPW podcast. I'm your host, Xylo Aria, and today we are here with the lovely MK Reynolds. So MK is the founder of Many Moon. So Many Moon specializes in digital marketing for labels and artists in the electronic music space, and their clients include people such as Oliver Heldens, Hell Deep Records, Slushy, and Axtone. So great to have you with us, MK. How are you doing? A little bit poorly, unfortunately, I hear.
Hello, yes, thank you for having me. I have been struck by COVID, as I'm sure many people have at this point, but we're soldiering on. I think I'm at the tail end of it, so can't complain.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, hopefully that doesn't last too long and you're back to 100% very soon.
That is the plan.
Well, thank you for chatting to us today anyway. And we're here to talk to you about playlisting strategies, something that so many people seem very curious about these days as streaming becomes, is such a big part of music and the playlisting part of it seems to be a bit of a mystery. So great to chat to you about that. Mm-hmm. So before we jump into the details, do you want to tell me a little bit about what exactly do we mean when we're talking about playlisting strategies? And it could sound a bit obvious, but we'll just spell it out anyway.
Yeah, of course. So I think with any strategy, it's sort of defining what you're hoping to achieve, how you're going to get there and like why, and then the specific targets that align with your end goal. So why do you want to be featured in these playlists? What is the purpose and how are we going to get you there, basically? And I think part of that is then like extensive research into how certain playlists align with your ultimate goal. So it may be that people want more streams or they want to get in front of new audiences, but they still have a genre or type of music that they want to put out. So it's making sure that the people you target as part of that strategy align with you as an artist and like your beliefs and your values and your music. So the strategy is like all encompassing of all of that, and it's basically the roadmap to get you from A to B with this release.
Okay. So it seems like that is a vital thing to define for yourself before you jump into it. And I guess a lot of people go straight into the contacting playlist curators and all of that stuff. So how would you recommend an artist first go about defining that vision?
I think it's important to understand so with your release, what is the purpose of that release? Like, is it a passion? Like, basically, you need to look at the way you want to come across as an artist and where you want to place yourself, and that's much bigger than just your playlisting strategy. That is that's your brand as an artist, and then that's sort of like the macro level, and then you have to sort of filter that down to, so this is me as an artist, this is what I want to achieve. And that goes back to your values as a person. Like, why do you do music? Why did you get into this in the first place? And then you look at the releases, like, what does this release mean? Is this something you've worked on for your entire career and it's a huge moment? Or are you somebody that just loves music and can churn out tracks? It does, like, either way, it's fine. Everybody has their thing. But then looking at that release and what you want to achieve with that release, and then you bring in the playlisting strategy, which is part of your release strategy. So you'll have your social media plan, you'll have your ad plan, and then the playlisting plan and any other promotional tools that you decide to use too. So I think it all comes down, it's like there's a much higher level, and then it filters all the way down to these like small parts and the tools that you are using to get you to that ultimate end goal, which is why you do what you do anyway.
Mm-hmm. So if you are someone who are able to churn out tracks, or someone who this release is a huge thing that they've been working on for years and years, how would that change how you approach the playlisting part of it?
I think basically when it comes to playlisting, you need to have a database of people that align with you and your music, and that could be for a passion project, something you've worked on for years. I think that list would be smaller and it would be more selective, because you've worked on that for so long. You want it in the right places, you want it to get in front of people. But if you churn the tracks out, and you churn them out because you just love making music and you can just absolutely get quantity, then obviously that kind of, not obviously, but that kind of aligns with the playlist, because you can just go for quantity because there's more to work with. Likelihood is that the tracks will suit a range of people. Like one track might not suit one curator, but another track that you've churned out might suit another. So it just opens the pool up a bit more, if that makes sense.
Okay. So are you then not contacting a curator for like one song? Because if you're churning them out and you said like one might not fit, but another one will, are you sending them a body of work, or are you just sending them like one particular thing?
The way we do it is track by track. So there'd always be a gap. We would want a gap before speaking to them if it's in the same sort of genre. But it's definitely, you start to build that story of you as an artist. So that specific release's story, a bit about you as an artist, and then you start to build that relationship with the curators. So they begin to know you and your sound, and people want people to do well. So if they buy into your story and they like that track, then you've got somebody that you can keep coming back to when you have more music, and you'll start to build that really nice relationship where they'll be honest with feedback as well. They'll say like, this one maybe wasn't for us, but like, please do come back, so we loved this one that we supported last time.
Okay. And when you think about bringing your music to a curator, what do you think are the greatest influences to whether something gets on a playlist or not? Like, is it just the song, or are there lots of other things to think about?
I think the song is one part, the story is another. So I just touched on that, but people want to know the story behind the track, the inspirations, that's what people start to connect with. Whether there's interesting collaborators on it, whether like cool DJs have already started supporting it, whether there's a backstory about where it came from, whatever that might be. I think the sound, the story, and then your approach. I think your approach to speaking with them is really important. So a lot of curators will say they'll have how they're happy to be contacted on their playlist or wherever, like whatever database you find them from. So if you start like spamming their DMs, the likelihood is they're going to get annoyed, because this is still their space as well. So I think your approach and the manner in which you speak with them is super important. Like, don't be pushy. Like, I think 1 or 2 emails, like one reaching out, if email's their preferred way of contact, reaching out, and then a follow-up. But I think once you go down the route of absolutely spamming them for an answer, then I think that can, even if they love the track, they could just end up getting annoyed. So yeah, I think the track itself, the story, and your approach are like 3 super important things.
Okay. So that brings us to another part of it. So I guess some people might think the best way to reach out to playlists or pitch to them is just through the Spotify artists app when you go to upload a song. And I guess there's a little bit there for a story or the reason behind the song, but it doesn't seem to be a huge part of that process. So how often are you reaching out to people outside of that? Is that just kind of a really small part of the playlisting process, and is contacting people in other ways the bigger part of it?
So artists generally, from our experience, they handle the editorial themselves because it is like you said, you go into Spotify for artists, you submit your pitch, and then, it's the powers that be that decide whether you get a placement or not in the editorial playlist. So when we talk about playlisting, it's always third party because it's your private curators. It's the people that have built their own following that you can then start to reach out to privately. And there's a few ways to do that. You can go deep into researching within that, within Spotify itself, start digging out playlists that are relevant to your sound, or that, it's important to have target playlists or targets that you want to get on that you can monitor the success of. And often they will have their email in their bio, so you can start to build your database manually. But then there's other ways of going about it where there's platforms that they are pay to play, but there's one called Submit Hub. So you basically buy tokens and you get access to this database, and then you can start searching genre or different, moods. So music for gaming or music for studying or whatever that might be, whatever sort of mood your track might fit, you can start going down that route. And they usually ask for 1 to 3 tokens to submit, I think, depending on the size of the playlist. So there's that way to go about it as well. One costs, one doesn't. But basically, yeah, you have to go down this sort of email or through an existing database to submit, or through existing contacts, which you more likely than not will already have their emails.
Okay. So if you're going down the Spotify route and just manually looking for playlists, are there any specific ways to search within Spotify? I know Google has actually so many in-depth filter things that maybe normal people wouldn't know about. Are there any tricks in there that you'd recommend?
So Spotify almost has its own SEO now that curators have caught onto. So you'll notice the bigger playlists will have those keywords in them. So it will say, piano music for relaxing. It's very specific. So even if the playlist name itself, driving music or music for driving, it's basically, I think a good starting point, if you're doing it completely off your own back, is to really get in tune with, well, what would I do whilst I'm listening to this track, and just brainstorm that. And then you can just start searching through Spotify of, well, maybe I would study to this track, or maybe I would relax, or whatever that might be, pool party vibes, I don't know. But just basically brain dump everything that you think your track could fit nicely with, and then you can start to find these playlists, because like I said, it's almost got its own SEO now, where people are searching specifically, so you have to play the game to come up.
Okay, that's interesting to do a brainstorm session of what would you be doing while listening to this track. It sounds kind of obvious now that you've said it, but it's not really something that I would think of. So that's great. And then, is there a way to filter out Spotify generated playlists? Because I guess there's no easy way to apply for those.
There isn't, but typically Spotify is the top ones, because of it being their platform, they'll just push their own straight away. So just get clear of them, and then you'll be in the third party territory.
Okay. Yep. No, that's a good shout as well. And then you mentioned Submit Hub, and I feel like so many people have different thoughts on Submit Hub, and I know, back in the day, someone who used to work in one of the music blog type things, that they just kind of go through the different plays just to get the money from Submit Hub, unfortunately, and sometimes write some pretty horrible feedback. What would you say about like potential success rate of Submit Hub?
So the one thing that I would say is it takes time, but you really have to do your research. So Submit Hub just kind of filters so you put your genre in and it'll say at the top level, it'll say how many playlist followers they have. But if you then click through and then go onto their playlist on Spotify, the playlist that it's filtered that's relevant to you might have 3 followers, which is obviously not much use. So you really don't take what it's filtering at face value. I would use it as a resource to go through, shortlist the playlists that you want to reach out to, that you want to use, but then go into Spotify and dig deep, because if it's a playlist with thousands of tracks, then it's kind of, it's very obvious that curator is just accepting to make some money off of the submission. But if it's a carefully curated playlist that you would listen to that has a handful of tracks, like 50 tracks, is a couple of hours, then they've obviously taken their time and your track will be heard. So I think you really just have to look at the details. Like if that playlist has come up and it's got 3 followers, avoid. It's not going to benefit your track. If the playlist has come up, it's got thousands of followers, but it's also got thousands of tracks, again, likelihood is your track's not going to get heard very often. So it's good because whilst you can fall into the trap of submitting it because that's how it pulls through and it looks like these curators are really good because they've got however many thousands of followers, you then have to just do that extra due diligence basically to then fine-tune that even further. So I think there are the bad eggs on there that are doing it for the wrong reasons, but if you take that extra step, then you can harness it for good.
Okay, all right. Well, that's good to know that there are some plus ways of using that. So that's good. And are there any particular tricks that you might have to find, ways to get in touch with the Spotify curator? So I know you mentioned some people might have their email in their bio, but maybe some people don't. And I know that sometimes with a PR specialist, you might have some special tricks up your sleeve of finding emails. Is there anything that you'd recommend?
I think it's a tricky one because the playlist curators that want to be contacted will have their email. So I think it's just being careful of crossing that boundary, because how you approach them is really important. I would say if you're not pushy and they do have an Instagram that they push their playlists on, I think reaching out on there just to see if they accept submissions is completely fine. And then obviously there is the next layer of people who run the campaigns for you that have the secret contacts. That's the next step. But it's my main piece of advice with all of this is do your research, and just when you think you're at the level where you've found enough, click through to the next thing and the next thing and just completely ransack almost ransack their pages to just check where these contact forms are or how to get in touch, because every curator has their own way of preference. Some have submission boxes that if you click through to their Instagram, they'll have that as a link in bio. So it is a case of clicking through every bit of link. Once you've got your database of targets that you think are where you want to hit, then just doing that link click through link click through link click to find the next place that is their preferred method of contact.
Okay. Sounds like a lot of work. So how long does it take you, MK, to put something together? And is it that you have a certain list that you're kind of using more often? I guess it would take someone longer if they were doing it for the first time. is there an amount of time that you'd recommend to spend, or is it really dependent?
I think it's, if you're doing it yourself, it's really dependent, because the more time you spend building these relationships and fine tuning these targets, then obviously the more valuable your database is to you. With us, it just varies, because so when we take on a track for playlisting, we only take it on if we think we can get the results we want. So we wouldn't say yes to a track that we just don't think would connect with our database, which I think is super important, because there's definitely companies out there that would just say yes, take your money, not get the results. And I think playlisting, there's some dodgy fellas have cropped up. So I think, firstly, if you do use an agency, that should always be the first sort of step. Like, have they listened to the track? Have they given their own feedback? Have they said they think they can work it? Because, yeah, I think a lot of people, well, not a lot of people, but I think people would just take it just to take the money. But anyway, I digress.
Oh, yeah. No, actually, it's funny you mentioned this, and I'm glad you bring it up as well, because it's a conversation that I was having just a few days ago about someone else who's been in the industry for a while, who was very frustrated because this seemed to be a pet peeve of theirs, of some, PR companies just taking on tracks when, and then just sending a generic email blast and saying they've kind of done their job, when it's, maybe not the right fit for them. It's not really doing a lot for the artist. So it's really great to hear from you that you take on tracks that you think will work for you, and will work for the artist as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's so much power in playlisting now, in terms of getting in front of new audiences and streaming. And I think it's awful that people take advantage of it, because it's, like I said, it's a lot of power, and it's a necessary step because of the power of streaming in general. Yeah, I just think a good company will be transparent that they wouldn't take it on. And I just think that's really key. But in terms of time spent on it, it really varies. So it just depends what the track is and what the sort of, so with us, it's different sort of agreements. Like, if we like the track, but maybe it might not be, basically there's sort of two levels to it. Like, if we think, yes, we 100% can get the placements with our contacts, then we go. But if we think it might stick, it might not, like we're not too sure, then we would take it on, but we'd spend a bit more time working that, because it would need a bit more, perhaps, encouragement, or we would need to cast the net a bit wider, or whatever that might look like. So with us, it really varies in terms of what we've agreed to come on with, and like that's always case by case. But for yourself, like, the time that you can invest into this research and the database you can build, and once you start reaching out to them and start building that relationship with them, that is only going to grow. So I think what time you can invest into it, like, you will benefit back. So there's no sort of sweet spot, but I think just dedicating that time to it is really key.
Okay. And when you say that there are some people that you have a previous relationship with that might be into a particular track, how important do you think that previously established relationship is? And is it something that independent artists can build themselves?
I think it's so valuable. I think in general, in music, the sort of gatekeepers, if you will, like, having that relationship with them, like, should be nurtured, because they're the people, like we touched on before, the journey is such a huge part of it. And if they support one track and then they see you growing and they see you building more tracks in your discography and basically just venturing out on your artist journey, like I said, people want people to succeed, so they are super valuable. And I think having like some kind of tracker is really important. So when you start releasing more consistently, you'll have your database of playlists that you have as targets, but then you'll have a tracker of which ones you managed to get on and how that impacted your streams, and also the feedback they sent. Because if like some of the feedback you'll get from curators is things, some of it will be critical, and like you can take that on and work with it, but some of it is just people are super excited to hear more because they really loved the first track. So having that in a tracker that you can then be like, right, this is my first stop for this next release, is amazing, because you know there's already some foundations there.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, that's great. And how important is it with playlisting for the music to be new? Like, could you pitch older stuff as well?
It's a tricky one. I think typically like the first few weeks around release is really important. With editorial on Spotify, I think it has to have been accepted, or the track has to have started to pick up momentum, which you see a lot with TikTok now. Like TikTok, get hold of a track, it starts to trend, the streams creep up. It might have been out for a few years and then it lands back in playlists. So I think with Spotify particularly, it has to be picking up momentum again. But with third party, I think if as long as the release is relatively recent, I think it's fine. But again, I think curators will want to know why. So if a track's a few years old, why are you repitching it now? And I think having, again, it's that story element. Like, are you re-releasing it? Is it a big anniversary? Has something happened? Like, dig into that story. Like, what is the reason? And then I think you can have another stab at it. But I wouldn't just go willy-nilly.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Good advice there. And when we're talking about, I know you mentioned some tools already around the Submit Hub as well. Are there any other specific tools that you might use? I know some people talk about things like Chartmetric and these other few bits. Is there anything else that you'd recommend to do that research?
So we use so Spotify for Artists is incredible once you've got the placements, because you can track the streams that's generated. So in terms of like reporting, I would always go back to there. Song Stats is also good to monitor acceptance. So you'll get a notification on that straight away when you get added to a playlist. So that's really good just to keep tabs on where you're up to. And that is also great. So we touched on earlier that playlisting is just like one piece of the puzzle in terms of your release campaign. So Song Stats and Spotify for Artists in particular then will tell you where your track's being listened to. So if you are putting some ad budget into your release campaign, then you can start to target these local areas, because you know that there's already a bit of pickup there, there's a bit of momentum, and you can build into that. So in terms of like adding to your release campaign, they're both great. Chartmetric is brilliant because you can see the plays and the followership, but you can also see that in Submit Hub. So there's like I think they work quite nicely together, because you can find people in Submit Hub and then you can do a bit of digging in Chartmetric, and you can do a bit of digging like on Spotify itself. And then beyond that, spreadsheets are your best friend to keep track of everything. It's not really like a tool, it's nothing too fancy, but keeping track of everything so you can, like we touched on, like building that database, that really valuable tool, like, or I think just coming back and just consistently adding to that, keeping track of the streams, the feedback, the people, the links, the contact sheet, that will be almost like your Bible of playlisting. So I think, yeah, that's the main other port of call.
Okay. I'm very much a fan of spreadsheets, so you have me there anyway, and the importance of that. So yeah, everyone get onto the spreadsheets and the tracking. So that's good. And everything that you spoke about, so you've given us a few different tips around different ways to go about it and to put your strategy together. Is it something that you think genuinely that any artist could do on their own.
I'm 100%. I think it's a time resource. So agencies have it just depends. It depends how much time you have, basically. So if you are an independent artist, you're releasing independently, and you can sit and build this database, then you have complete control over it. You know exactly where it's up to, but it takes a bit of time to put that work in. The agencies have already got those contacts and they already have that. So if you have the budget and you don't have the time, then it makes sense to go to the agencies, because like it's almost like a shortcut, but obviously then that costs. So I think you 100% can do it yourself. It just takes time to build those relationships, to build that database, to do the research. So it just depends how you are and how your circumstances are and what time you can give to it as to whether that is the right route for you.
Okay. Well, it's good to know that it is a possibility anyway. Yeah. And how important do you think getting into these playlists is for an artist or building an artist fan base? Or do you think that really depends on what the artist is going for?
It really depends. I think streaming now is so powerful. I think getting into these playlists is important because you can kind of get lost in the ether otherwise. And I think having it as a priority within your release campaign is key, but I think there's more to it than just the playlist. Like the playlist alone won't build you fans. They'll get you discovered, they'll increase your streams and your monthly listeners, but that alone won't convert fans. You need to look at the bigger picture of what are you doing on your socials? How are you telling your story? Are you doing any live? Is there anything around that? So it's just one piece of that puzzle. I think people could click through. It's also really important. Something that we like really stress to all our clients is you'll get discovered in these playlists. So make sure your artist profile is like completely populated. There's photos of you, all your tour dates are there if you're on tour, all your socials are accessible there, and your bio is up to date, because people will do that one click, they'll see that, and then they can get to everywhere else, which is the other places that will start to convert fans as well, because they can start to buy into you and your journey. So just make it super easy for everybody to be able, like we touched on it with finding curators, like to be able to click through the links and make sure the links are there at every step. So a person can hear your music and then they can find out absolutely everything they need to know about you to start to make that decision to become a fan. So yeah, it's one piece of the puzzle.
Okay. Yep. No, good to know. And that fits around everything else that makes you an artist as well. So thank you, MK. There's been a lot to think about there, I guess, for a few people, and to put together their strategy. So talking a little bit about your career as well, and I think it's so great what you're doing as well, and starting Many Moons as well. It hasn't been too long, and you seem to be going from strength to strength, which is really exciting. So I'd love to talk a little bit about your career and what in the time that you've been doing what you've been doing, would you say has been the greatest moment in your career so far?
So it's a tricky one because there's been so many sort of highlights in terms of client work and what I've been able to do with clients. But like the biggest sort of highlight is actually launching Many Moon, like launching this business, because I've been in the industry for a while now and I've made my contacts, I've done all the networking that we talked about, but creating Many Moon and creating this business that like allows us to work with these incredible artists and like really get to know them and just be a part of their team and their journey has definitely been, it's not even like one particular moment, it's just like this whole journey of this past sort of year has just been amazing. It's been the hardest thing I've ever done, but it's been the most rewarding as well. So like bringing all these clients on, building this team, and the future is just, it's incredibly exciting. So I think, yeah, it's been the greatest period, but also the most challenging.
I feel like you've answered my next question, which was what's the greatest challenge? So the whole thing is also the biggest reward and the biggest challenge together, is it?
Yeah, basically, like I think every day like is a new. So I think working in the music industry is challenging anyway, but when you do it for other people and then doing it for yourself, there's just like a huge step in terms of the many hats you have to wear as a business owner. So I think every single day you learn something new, and you learn something that you never had to think about when you like did it for someone else. So I think that in itself is a huge challenge. But so that's more in terms of like running a business that's been challenging, whereas like the music and the clients and all of that is just wicked, and it's what I know and it's what I love doing. So I think that has just kind of come with us, and it's really cool to be able to mold that into sort of my vision. But yeah, I think this whole past year has been incredibly rewarding, but also incredibly challenging.
Yeah, I mean, I can completely relate with you in everything that you say around that, because it's funny. I feel like the things that are the most rewarding are also challenging. Like there's not really rewarding things that just come to you, because that doesn't really make it rewarding. So all of the work behind running your own business and getting that started up, and the new things that you learn every day. I know what you mean, and it's great that you're enjoying the journey, and you know, expanding your knowledge on all the new things that you didn't even know that you needed.
Yeah, definitely. And it's the same for artists as well. Like that is their business and their journey, and it's this like the absolute same. So I think there's the musical element and the creative element, but then there is this business element that you have to just learn every single day. So
Most definitely, most definitely. We've actually just kicked off our MPW year of masterclasses for our students, and we've just finished the planning element, which has been so much around just understanding or treating your music as a business as well, and really understanding what are you trying to get to and what's your vision. So I think it's good that you've mentioned the importance of that as well, even in coming up with that strategy for the playlisting and everything else.
yeah.
And with that, if you had one biggest tip for artists who are trying to get onto playlists, or just kind of find their audience, is there something specific that you would recommend?
It's not really specific, but I've banged on about it quite a lot. It's just do your research, do the digging, like use all the tools. Like you don't have to have all the secret answers. You just have to sit and go down the rabbit hole and pull together all this information, and then you can start to sort of pinpoint how to utilize it. But that my biggest tip is just spend time doing the research.
Okay. All right. Do the research for a good outcome. Okay, cool. We will keep that in mind. All right. Thank you so much, MK. It's been such a pleasure chatting to you, and I know I've learnt a lot, and I'm sure our audience has got heaps from it as well. So, are you just going to take it easy for the rest of your day?
No. I had a quiet weekend. I had a rest. I am feeling better now, so I think I will persevere, crack on, and get a coffee in me.
Oh, goodness. Okay. All right. Well, hopefully your recovery just keeps going in the right direction. And if you do need a break, that you do get to take that.
Oh, yes, 100%. I would definitely, if my body needs a break, I will listen to it, because that was what I did this weekend, and it was very nice.
That's good. That's good. All right. Well, good to hear. And I will leave you to your coffee and all the rest of your day. And it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.